What a great day to live in a city that is home of the Commissioner Cup winners. And a big part of that success for our aces is Kelsey Plum. And earlier this week, a real informative and eye opening and fantastic piece was done on her journey on and off the court by Rachel Galligan, women's basketball analyst at Just Women's Sports and Winsider. She's also a former player and coach and Hall of Famer. And we're glad to have her joining us to talk about the story that she did. And as always, all Insider Calls are brought to us by BetQL. Bet smarter and beat the books. Download your BetQL app today or go to betql.com.
Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I read your piece on Monday. I was just so impressed with your conversation with Kelsey Plum on her mental health journey through the different chapters of her career. But I like to make the joke that I have a degree in communications, and which is basically the same thing as journalism, but without the integrity. But I think ultimately, no matter where you come from, it's about creating like a safe conversational space. And otherwise, how else could you expect anyone to trust you with a personal side of their story?
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest. First, thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. I don't have a traditional path into journalism. I coached college basketball. I played professionally. I actually coached against Kelsey Plum the year that she broke the record. Actually, it was her junior year. So, I kind of made the transition from college basketball coaching to then owning my own business and working in the media. And it's been a little bit unconventional. But it was really interesting how it went down. I mean, honestly, I had Kelsey Plum on. I have a podcast with Winsider that we've had for about 5 or 6 years now. We had her on the show a few years back when she was still kind of finding her footing. We talked about it in the piece about how it took her a while to kind of find that confidence. And it's interesting. She followed me on Twitter. And I was like, oh, that's cool. All right. And I had been kind of really wanting to write a feature piece. And I was kind of originally thinking I wanted to do it on Becky Hammon and things. She's really difficult to get, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelsey Plum had followed me, and I thought, man, I am really about her this year. I've watched her from her collegiate career all the way into the pros. I had talked to her before. We had a good relationship, and I kind of just pitched it to her directly. And she is the one that came up with, she basically said, hey, I really, really respect you. I really admire what you're doing. I have a lot of things I want to say. Are you willing to do this for me? Because I was going to take the approach of kind of like, okay, I want to know about you. I want to dive a little bit deeper. I want to tell your story because, in my opinion, she's a top MVP candidate.
Hard to argue.
But, yeah, and I think that she has, and we could go back and forth about what that who is at the top of that list right now. I think it's a pretty short list, but I've been I've been a big advocate of her just the last couple of years, and just watching that confidence when I watched her on the floor, I was so impressed with there was something different. And so I was going to take that just kind of approach and just kind of see where it went. Well, she came to me and said, listen, I've got some things I want to say, and I really respect you, and I'm willing to do this if you are. And so it was kind of all Kelsey Plum. I kind of offered to do it and put something out there, and she kind of took it to that next level, which to be honest, I mean, no one knew about these things. No one knew about this struggle. I remember the record chase. I remember everything from her time at Washington. I mean, obviously, I've watched her every year in her time in the league, and so I'm learning all of these things about her as she's going. But it was her who came to me really willing to open up.
And Rachel, you talk about, everything that happened while she was at Washington. And to be honest, it was pretty daunting to read through and hear Kelsey, tell people honestly, like, while she was chasing the records, her being known as, oh, you're the girl trying to break those records and having to go to the hotel room during the WNBA draft. And, of course, this piece, it's very thorough. So you went back, you talked to the head coach at Washington, and you talked to some of the teammates. With hindsight and looking back, did they say anything about noticing certain things? Because obviously they had a blind eye because, they're trying to win a national championship and get to the Final Four. But now going to do this piece now years later, do they notice anything and go, oh, maybe that was a sign back then?
No. When I had talked to Mike Neighbors, and then I had talked to Kelsey, and we had a very, very, very long interview, just conversation. And I would fall short of saying interview. It was more so a really in-depth just conversation, opening up to one another about what this was. And she allowed me a lot of time to kind of really understand her, because this was a really delicate piece. I realized, I had to do this right. I had to make sure I said the right things and put it out there the right way. And then I went back to Mike Neighbors, and he was like, oh my gosh, these are things that I didn't even know about. because and he did a really great job of explaining why. At the time, the record chase, it took on a life of its own. We all remember that period of time. She was all over everything. And it is easy, human nature, just to see that excellence in what she was doing on the court. And it was so exciting, and it was so groundbreaking, and it was so amazing. And I think, her team and her coaching staff was so focused on just kind of like, hey, let's just stick with the team. And their hearts were in the right place. Let's focus on the team. Let's do what we need to do. But Mike Neighbors, he did a phenomenal job of basically saying, like, Rachel, I'm not trained to notice the signs, and even 5 years later, 6 years later, how far we have come, from the collegiate coaching understanding of, okay, these are the things to look for. We've got support staffs. We've got people that these players and these young student athletes can go talk to. We didn't have those things 5 or 6 years ago. He's a trained Division I high level basketball coach. And Kelsey, as she said in the piece, in the interview, she said, I really kept this to myself. I want to be very clear. Nobody knew that I was going through this. So it's no one's fault in terms of on the actual staff, but picking up those signs and maybe picking up, he's not certified to that. He doesn't know that. But I think that brings in the question of, like, okay, how far have we come from even just a few years ago to now, where you've got these support systems that we didn't have back then.
No, you're so right, Rachel. And I'm a former collegiate athlete myself, and I know that you played and had a very decorated career at Eastern Illinois. But even during my time, I was really lucky to have my Coach Matthews, who happened to be a woman as well. And I think that also kind of offered a different lens where she could tell where you were starting to kind of spin out before it got really bad. But when you have so much that you're in pursuit of, and like you said, they're trying to make sure that not all the pressure is going on Kelsey because this is a team game and everything else. It's just, there's only so many hours in the day, only so much capacity that people have to truly notice. And to be honest, the athletes noticing within themselves. I think a lot of this is volunteered. Right. Like you're saying, Kelsey came to you with this story. How many weeks and conversations would you have to have with someone, like you said, 5-6 years ago, just for them to even get to the point where they would trust you with this story, or even have gone through it themselves to kind of unpack everything, because that's what we call doing the work.
Yeah, and she was very, you can tell kind of the maturity and the growth that she has experienced since that time. The self-awareness, I mean, at this time, we're talking about a college senior who can't, her world is spinning. She's thrown on ESPN. She's got camera crews following her around. She's trying to break this record, but more so than anything, she's trying to help her team win games. I can think back to when I was a college senior, and I mean, would I have had enough self-awareness to understand what is going on inside of me right now? And I think it's a phenomenal testament to just the work that not only, obviously she's a phenomenal athlete and the work that she did with her recovery, but the work that she put into her self-awareness, her self-understanding, and being able to look back on everything at this point at 27 and be like, wow, okay, that's what I was experiencing. Let me make sense of this, and let me help others who may not be able to make sense of it right now.
And it was almost kind of like a forced self-reflection period, because as you mentioned in this piece and as you were going through kind of her career as she made that transition from the collegiate game to the pros, like the only reason why she really hit this wall is because all of a sudden she blew out her Achilles and she had a lot of time on her hands. And when you're caught in the sauce and you're lost and you don't even know kind of the cost that you're paying and the consequences that's going to have down the road, be that the physical toll that you put on the body, or just the constant, well, I'll deal with that later, or I'm not going to focus on this aspect of my life, or as we were just talking about, that self-awareness. I just think that so many of us get caught up in the grind or the pursuit of whatever we're doing. And so that's why when that inevitable end comes, or a really big interruption like an injury, we struggle so mightily with our self-identity. I mean, it took me years to adjust to the life after my hockey career ended, because you just lose so much of validation and purpose and understanding of who you know yourself to be.
Exactly. And, it was really interesting to talk about that Achilles injury, because I remember it happening vividly, and she had just started to really turn a corner. Like, I was like, man, she's really starting to kind of show those similar Kelsey Plum vibes that we had, from a media and just, fan perspective become so accustomed to seeing. And then that happened. And there wasn't a lot out there in terms of what that did to her at that time. I mean, this is the same time as COVID, so there's a lot going on. Everybody's dealing with a lot of different issues at this point, and the WNBA bubble, and so a lot of that focus was on those types of things. And so really interesting to her, for her to talk about those things. And about that period of time, it really struck me when she said, she was riding in the car, and her friend was with her, and he was really visibly concerned, and she had a sense of peace, like for the first time in years, she was forced to just slow down because, anyone who follows women's basketball, collegiately, professionally, understands at the highest levels the grueling schedule that these women have to undergo. It never stops. It goes directly from the collegiate season to like 2 weeks later, the training camp, to then the WNBA starts, and then you're right over there in overseas. I mean, it doesn't stop. So her life had been a complete whirlwind. And so listening to her talk about that period of time and the sense of peace that she had and how she embraced that period of time. And Mike Neighbors spoke about her ability to focus, and he was really adamant to me. He said, I've never known anybody in my life who can focus on the present and at the task at hand better than anyone other than Kelsey Plum. So if you apply that, understanding of her into that period of time, it kind of makes sense, right? Like she embraced that moment and what she was going through to really address what she needed to address because she didn't have a chance to before. And I think that was really, really, really powerful. And she shed so much light. I told her, I said, listening to you and talking to you and writing this piece made me a better person. I can't imagine what it's going to do, being able to put this out in the world.
And one of the things I really enjoyed is about 3 weeks ago, there was this tweet that was going viral that essentially this guy was saying, work ethic is so important and you have to grind every day. And Kelsey quote tweeted it and said, that mentality is the same reason why I tore my Achilles. And I'm curious when it comes to the Aces, and obviously Kelsey being a number one pick and having all that pressure and attention, she's fortunate enough to also be in the same team as someone as A'ja Wilson and Jackie Young, who are also number one picks. In your conversations with them, did they kind of help Kelsey and just each other in realizing that, we've all been through these same type of expectations and the weight of those expectations?
I didn't get into that much detail with A'ja. She just kind of talked about the back end of it and what you're kind of seeing right now. I think when it comes to Kelsey Plum, she had so much on her shoulders and so much stress and had no time to process anything that was happening in her life. And that took a while, and we saw that as a reflection on the court. We saw that or whatever. And we saw that through overseas. I think we saw that even with her, her injury and how she handled that period of time. I think, A'ja talked about, obviously, I wanted to be really cognizant of talking to the people who'd been around her during this period of time and talked about how early on she was concerned what other people had to say. She was concerned about letting people down. But then clearly had seen her through this transition of time. And through that, it was kind of like you have to find that balance. And Kelsey talked a lot about this, about saying, hey, we feel like we got to go. We got to every second, every day. If we take a day off, it's a missed opportunity. She was very, very intentional about talking about, like, I will shut down. If it's an off day, now I don't touch a basketball. I don't think about basketball. I may do something from a recovery perspective with my body, get in there and get some treatment and work on my, ice bath or, whatever that might be. But I'm not going to touch a basketball. I'm not going to work with a basketball. I'm going to be really intentional about balance in my life. And sometimes I think we as a society and professional athletes at times, we go. People get burnt out. People get hurt. People don't have time to process what's going on around them. And more so than anything, not really her teammates, but more so her. That's what she talked about, is an off day is my off day. It's about me. It's about my life. It's about my relationships. It's about doing the things that I love outside of this game and remembering who I am outside of this game.
Yeah, it's almost like you're validating your life outside of it, because I feel like, especially with how hyper-professionalized youth sports and just the feeder system have become, that, that pursuit becomes an escape wrapped. Your identity, but an escape wrapped in an excuse. Like the rest of your life bows to this. Like, I'm going to miss I didn't go to prom because I had hockey. Like that's that. And those little decisions that you make, and ultimately for many of us, they're totally worth it. But then, like you said, there's no space to process. There's no place to celebrate. And you get lost in that monotony of the pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to pose this to you because you're a former athlete, you're a coach. There's clearly something going on in the ranks of collegiate athletics. And I think what we've kind of already talked about in terms of that transition and developing that self beyond who you are as an athlete. How do you think we can better do a job better job in supporting those who are going through that and developing that self other than an athlete? Because I get shudders down my spine every time I read about one of these other student athletes that take their own life, because I know what that tunnel sounds like when it's closing in on you, when there's a ton of stress and you got class and a test and you're not playing well. Like, it's a scary spot to be.
It is. And I think we have to check ourselves. We have to check ourselves continuously from every aspect, from the grassroots level, from the parental level, from the collegiate level, from the professional level. Think about it. When you're 15 years old, you're forced to pick your sport at this point. It's been like that for a few years. Like, I grew up in a period of time where I played 3 sports in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go long periods of time without touching a basketball. Now, some people might say that was a bad thing. For me, it was a healthy thing. And I would do track and field, and then I would have my downtime, and I had balance. I think we as a society miss out on balance, and we run these kids into the ground. I'm just coming off of July, where I'm really involved in a lot of it's a big basketball month in terms of recruiting from a travel event perspective. And I'm looking at these girls and I think, man, they are on their 14th day of playing 2 games a day. They're traveling all over the country. They're playing on not always the best floors. And is this really necessary? And I think, in terms of just that specific topic, the calendar is changing next year. It will not look the same. It's a little bit more stretched out because, again, exposure is necessary. You've got to be able to play in front of collegiate coaches or, whatever next level coaches. And so that's important. But I'm very thankful that the calendar is changing. And so hopefully that provides a little more balance for some of these young girls coming up through the grassroots, ranks, because I feel like, 14, 15 days in July is just unnecessary for everybody involved. It's not good for the college coaches. It's not good for the players. But I just think we have to remember balance is important. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's okay to mix it up. It's okay to shut down. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to decompress. And I'm a victim of that myself. I will go so hard in the things I'm doing professionally. Sometimes I have to check myself. I'm even doing it today. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break and just go turn off my phone and relax and enjoy the day because I've been so go, go, go. We have to have more people talking about it, and we have to have more leaders talking about balance, in my opinion, and all across the board.
No, 100%. And I feel like we all feel like that, which is why I'm so happy we're having this conversation. And you bring up balance. I can't help but ask you, Rachel, last night, reports coming out that Liz Cambage might possibly be walking away from the game for good with all of her business ventures and kind of not wanting to play basketball anymore. What do you think of everything that's happened with the fallout with the Sparks?
It's hard because when you talk about Liz Cambage, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things that have happened the last few years. It never seems like she ever found her place and her happiness in this league, and that makes me sad. Obviously, I think I have been a very, very, very big Liz Cambage proponent from a skill and a size and a capability perspective on the court. But it feels like, to me, that on-court potential and the off-court balance and just happiness have never clicked, in the way in which you would hope for someone that they would. So, I mean, for me personally, my opinion, I'm not very surprised by this. I felt like there's a lot that the LA Sparks have got to figure out. And I feel for Liz. I hope that she is able to, find her happiness and continue to find that path in which enlightens her life and brings her peace. The LA Sparks are, in my opinion, it was a situation where Derek Fisher was at the end of his contract, and it was a Hail Mary. We're going to go chips all in. Let's see if we can win. And it was going to be really difficult to make those pieces fit in the first place. You had a lot of different personalities. You had a lot of different chemistry issues that I personally, I cover the league so much, I was very concerned about. So I'm personally not very surprised by this. But, I think that I don't know Liz personally. I have never had her open up to me and tell me her story. There's a lot there, as we all know. And I just hope that, she can find that peace and maybe find that happiness, find that path in which that is for her, and that's really all I can hope for.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned that is environment is truly everything. And that's why I think this Aces team is really special, because you can just tell in their pregame dance routines that they're incredibly close. And to see their ascension and on a more personal level, Kelsey's, it makes a whole lot of sense why each of them are reaching new heights in these modern times. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Rachel. I'm thrilled to add another friend to the former athlete, current media badass section of my Rolodex. But stories like this matter, and I think people don't really fully realize it, but those who know what it feels like the night before fitness testing does. So be well, stay hydrated, and we hope to have you again on the show soon.
I appreciate you guys for having me on. Thank you for amplifying the story. All the credit goes to Kelsey. She was the one that really was the ringleader of this. And anytime you guys want me on, just let me know.
There it is. Our Win Insider family's growing. Shout out to Miles Elric. Rachel, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Rachel Galligan, women's basketball analyst at Just Women's Sports and Winsider. Be sure to follow her on Twitter, by the way, at RachGal. That's RACHGALL. Glad to have her joining us and telling us this story. And as always, all Insider calls are brought to us by BetQL. Bet smarter and beat the books. Download your BetQL app or go to BetQL.com. Coming up next, Joel Osteen isn't the only one getting paid with amens. It's 11:40 The Bet.